Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 21st. Is it right? Thursday, December 21st, 2023. I'm just checking. Do I have the day right? I was looking at the calendar a minute ago, and I hadn't marked off that December 20th had passed. So these are important things to do. If it's not marked off on the calendar, it hasn't happened yet. Just like if there's no pics, it didn't happen. Same thing. Okay, well, trying to figure out exactly what was going on this morning, and just, tune in for the day. And I was reminded that I guess it's winter solstice today, which for some people is an occasion to say happy winter solstice. I don't think there's any other traditional greetings. Horrific winter solstice. It's not the thing that people say to one another. Well, no, anyway. Merry winter solstice. You can just go out and saying that as well if you want to get into the mainstream holiday spirit. Although if you're in England, it's happy anyway, so what's the difference? Anyway, I don't know. Just worth noting, I guess. It's good. It's about time that the days started getting longer. Quite honestly, I've had enough of this garbage. And we could do with some more sunlight around here. So a little at a time. Don't want to go overboard. And plenty to do in the meantime, wasting the daylight hours that we have. Huh. There's only like 9 or so daylight hours going on around here, and 2 of them, I'm sitting at this chair. I should be doing this show at night, which could be most of the rest of the day on a day like today. All right, well, let's see. Plenty to catch up on, of course. Greg Dworkin, no doubt, putting together a raft of stories for us. He was cut short yesterday by some work operations at the Connecticut branch office. It's not... I guess I can't call it world headquarters. I can call it Connecticut headquarters. How about that? New England headquarters, regional headquarters. So lots to catch up on there. People still talking. Still, I can't believe it. Talking about a state Supreme Court disqualifying a former president now running for re-election, being disqualified for the ballot under the 14th Amendment's Section 3 due to his insurrection activities. I don't know. Somehow that people think that that's like some sort of large scale story or something. I don't know. The founders probably thought it would have been, they would have been scratching their head. What 14th Amendment? Which one? I thought we rejected all the rest of them that, I don't know. Was there a famous wacko who might have been at the Constitutional Convention? This Bill of Rights is not long enough. We need to have 20 elements in this, new amendments in this Bill of Rights. And my 14th, I wonder what the 14th to be proposed actually was. Probably something about, 2-for-1 sales on mattress days, mattress sales on national holidays. Something like that, in all likelihood, because we are still doing that. I don't know why that would be happening. Anyway, plenty of other things to catch up on. What does Justice have in mind here today? Oh, okay, yeah, I saw this story here, alluding to Fahrenheit 451 here by saying cops are using Fahrenheit 451 as a blueprint to search for LGBTQ books in the school library. I did see in passing yesterday that, I don't know, where was it? Was it Texas? Was it Florida? I don't think so. I think it was actually one of the 48 other states, not normally at the front of the line of crazy, where cops were like searching I heard there was a kid with one of those LGBTQ themed books around here and we got to find it and confiscate it. And it wasn't, I don't think, Texas or Florida. So we might want to check in on that one. Let's see, other things on his mind today. All those NRA laundered Russian rubles. Oh yeah. Remember all that? To every GOP member of government went a long way, according to, a tweet by Julia Davis News. I'll check in on this, see what's going on, and then we'll turn our attention to Greg's List. Oh, okay. That's a good name for a website, by the way. Greg's List. Do you think we could make a success out of that? You could use it to hire the same guy that was doing work at his house the other day, hire his garbage company, whoever, if he has any kind of choice in it. I'm just going to check in here for a second on what Julia Davis is going on about here. I see a picture of Vladimir Zelensky here, so it must be serious and international. A website founded by a former U.S. Marine who now lives in Russia. A lot of people have moved to Russia for very dumb reasons. I wonder how they feel about that now. Falsely claimed that Zelensky purchased 2 luxury yachts with U.S. aid money. Oh, yes, I did see something about this morning. This disinformation was echoed by members of the U.S. Congress, I can't believe it, making crucial decisions about military spending, just as idiots were using misinformation to make crucial decisions on the Supreme Court for many years and still continue to do that. And, of course, are deciding fake cases invented in the think tank offices around Washington, D.C. So more disinformation, once again, being used to undermine the effectiveness of the United States government. Not terribly surprising, but yes, it is a story much under discussion today. I should keep that tab open. And welcome Greg to the show and let him get started on his 15-hour segment with all the backup that we've got. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. So from regional headquarters here in New England.
This just in, yes.
This just in. I'm going to start with Simon Rosenberg's newsletter. Just has a nice summary of the week so far.
Oh, all right. Well, that's helpful.
And remember, it's only Monday. From my newsletter today, he writes, Biden leads 47-45 in a new New York Times poll and also in a Quinnipiac poll. Colorado Supreme Court delivers another legal blow to Trump and MAGA. We'll talk a lot about that because that is the story.
Yes.
Crime, rents, inflation, and I should add gas prices all coming down. Dow hits another record high. 2023 has actually been a pretty good year for Democrats. And, oh, by the way, and I think you covered this on the show yesterday in the second hour, Trump World lied to the U.S. Park Service to get January 6th permit.
Right. You don't want to lie to the parks
The point
guys.
being that Trump World knew there was going to be a march.
Well, yes, and they were advertising it. I loved that whole thing. March for Trump. No, change the name. It could get us in trouble. March for America.
March for Melania.
Right, but no, the bad part was March. Try and get rid of the March out of the name.
March for Miller. Right. That's also, you got to use up all the M's.
Yeah. I think we might be out on that one. But okay. March for Marjorie Margolis Mezvinsky.
Yeah, something.
She had nothing to do with it. Just leave her out of this.
Just leave it out.
Okay. So, yeah, that was a hell of a story. I mean, it was very interesting watching them just try and say, there's no march here.
There's no march.
Your bus says
we didn't
march.
do it. Don't tell anybody.
If it was a march, I wouldn't need a bus.
If I'm a lawyer and trying to defend somebody, or if I'm a prosecutor, the thing you'd love is not only to get secret text messages, but the ones that say, don't tell anybody.
Yes, delete this immediately.
If you tell people.
Why is you taking notes? Yeah. Those are great ones. Like
can you keep
every
a
once
secret?
in a while. Burn after reading. How can I?
By the way, what wasn't made clear because for some reason people decided they were going to redact some of this stuff when they first passed this story around.
Oh.
This was a discussion between the whatever they call themselves, Women for Freedom or whatever.
Yeah, sure, right.
And a potential speaker that they wanted to get for this rally.
Yeah.
And that speaker was the My Pillow guy.
Yes.
Mike Lindell.
Right. Everybody needs to hear from the Pillow guy.
So he's the one who said,
yeah,
we're going to do this.
What are the secret plans?
Don't tell anybody.
Okay. Yes, Women for America First.
Yeah,
WFAF.
I couldn't remember exactly what it
says
stood
the
for.
radio station people. WFAF.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. Well, that was awfully dumb, but they're very dumb people. I don't know what else to tell
I'm
you.
going to start with the big story, just because I think it's just so overwhelming.
Yes.
And in a good way.
What is it? Okay.
And this is a really complicated situation, and we don't know how it's going to resolve. Welcome to 2023. Everything's complicated.
This is the Quaker Oats recall?
This is all simple, people. No, everything is complicated.
All right.
Axios has
Yeah.
The Supreme Court may not have any real way to avoid a starring role in the 2024 campaign or to shield itself from the constant firestorm that swirls around Trump. And this is true.
Yes. In fact, we did covered this kind of in an offhand comment.
Yeah, and I said,
yesterday.
In response to it, look, let's be honest. A good chunk of both sidesism is driven by fear the Supreme Court won't do the right thing and it'll save Trump, and both sidesers are afraid of retribution.
Oh, yeah, that's true too.
Whether it's a news outlet, what if he wins? We won't have access. Whether it's, Trump's a dictator, he's going to close my business and go after me. But the Supreme's got themselves in that jam, and they're the only ones that can get themselves out of it.
Yeah, that's true. I think in the course of discussion yesterday, I think I mentioned the Supreme Court has really got, they got themselves in a position where they really need to say, hey, our docket is entirely Trump cases these days. We've got to put a stop to this. We don't have time for anything else. We're just constantly taking emergency cases for this guy.
Now, Steve Vladeck, writing over at Substack on his One First vertical, whatever he calls it.
Well, it's first.
Had a really fascinating analysis of what's going on here.
All right.
And, not to read every word of it, but to step back and look at the big picture.
All right.
He tries to line things up and say, the problem for the Supreme Court is that everything that I'm about to say in these 7 points is true.
Okay.
Okay. 1, President Trump did, in fact, engage in insurrection. And he goes on to make the case. Number 2, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to the presidencies.
Yes.
And so Robert E. Lee couldn't run.
Right. But he had a horse, so it was all right.
Well, he didn't, so he could ride. But he couldn't ride to the presidency either.
Right, or march. That he had no permit for.
Number 3, Section 3 is self-executing.
Yes.
That means it can be enforced without some prior proceeding, like a criminal prosecution, and you don't need Congress.
Okay.
Number 4, the full Supreme Court has never decided any of the first 3 issues, even though they're all true.
Okay.
That means there's no precedent for the Supreme Court to say, well, we already decided this. They didn't.
Right. They didn't have to. It was self-executing, but okay.
Number 5, and this is where it starts to be really interesting. The Supreme Court will not, and in my view should not, let a single state Supreme Court have the last word here.
Okay.
Number 6, there are significant chunks of the American populace that will find it very hard to respect a Supreme Court that keeps Trump off the ballot. And there are significant chunks, number 7, of the American populace that will find it very hard to respect a Supreme Court that keeps Trump on the ballot.
Yes, that is true. It's worth noting.
So he goes on to make the point that given the fact that the Supreme Court is between a rock and a hard place, you, especially you lawyer types, but I think the public is ahead of us here. He basically doesn't say but implies. You have to stop thinking of the Supreme Court as the law only and the law first and, the hell with everything else. It's not how things work. I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is where Sandra Day O'Connor was a good justice. I don't like a lot of her decisions, but clearly she wasn't doing the law first. She was stepping back, looking at the big picture and thinking, well, how is this going to affect the American public? And sometimes she decided ways I like and sometimes she decided ways I didn't like, but she always had that in mind. She wasn't a textualist, an originalist. We're bound by what's written here. It's like, what does it all mean?
Yes.
And Vladeck steps back and said, the court has done this before. Even Brett Kavanaugh said that the Nixon tapes decision, where Nixon had to turn over the tapes, was like the greatest thing the Supreme Court ever did.
Oh, all right.
And Vladeck says, when you actually look at it from a lawyer point of view, it was a pretty bad decision. It came to the right conclusion, but the reasoning was incredibly flimsy. People say that about Roe v. Wade, too.
They do say that.
The point is you need to get to a certain place, and sometimes that's what you do. The dirty little secret, Vladeck writes, is that its analysis reflects a series of deeply unsettling and unpersuasive compromises. The court unnecessarily went out of its way to recognize a constitutionally grounded executive privilege without a ton of analytical support, in a context in which it could have assumed its existence without establishing it, and then held the privilege, had to give way to the prosecution's never before and never since recognized interest in having access to potentially inculpatory evidence.
Yes.
It was, as analytical coherence goes, a middling effort at best.
Okay.
Now, one can tell a similar story about Brown and other landmark cases where the court traded analytical sophistication for unanimity, or at least cross-ideological majorities, where the message of the court sent was more important than the specific analysis. And these cases are not departures from the rule of law. They're the epitome of it, reflecting a nuanced and complicated understanding of exactly what that contestable concept really means. You know, it's not just law, it's also justice. In other words, that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah.
So there's moments, he says, where the Supreme Court's doing more than just law.
That is true.
And if you find any of this discussion remotely persuasive, then the question becomes how the current Supreme Court could resolve the Section 3 issue in a way that's not perceived as partisan and doesn't further inflame toxic politics. He has a suggestion. I don't know if
that's possible, but okay. Let's hear it.
He says basically do what the Colorado lower court did, which was really smart, and say he was an insurrectionist. Beyond doubt, Supreme Court says so.
Yes.
But due to a technicality that we'll find somewhere and make up, we can't take him off the ballot. And that would, by finding he did engage in insurrection, but there's some impediment that prevents the court from providing a remedy, then it's not the most persuasive legal position, but it's the best way to see justice served. Label him an insurrectionist and put him on a ballot. That's an interesting point of view.
Yes.
And that's what the court may wind up doing, given the fact that they're stuck. And that's why the court in the other two cases may say there is no such thing as complete and total immunity.
Yeah.
And you could prosecute people under January 6th conditions because they had corrupt intent. And you decide for America on those two cases, and you split the baby on this one and say he is an insurrectionist. We just can't do anything about it for technical reasons.
I mean, it's a place to land. It's just, to me, it's extraordinarily troublesome to say, all right, well, as a matter of fact and law, we're finding that he's an insurrectionist. And I'm just erasing the last sentence or two of Section 3. I'm sorry, it does say that those who engage in insurrection are ineligible for office, but and that was the whole point of the section. But hey, we're labeling him. That's not very satisfactory. I understand he's, saying there's no actual perfect solution to this, but I mean, I'm still for the faulty solution that I like.
I don't necessarily agree with his point of view.
I get you.
The argument here.
Well,
this is the answer to those people who say, well, as a matter of law, he's not an insurrectionist. Really,
well, he is
not proven yet. I mean, he hasn't been convicted.
Doesn't say you have to,
and it doesn't, But I'm just saying, and you could just turn around and say, look, Supreme Court says he's an insurrectionist. Just shut up with that.
Yeah,
it's done.
I mean, I guess it's just not worth it's not worth as much as having him off the ballot.
I want him off the ballot.
Yeah,
I think it's the right decision, but I'm trying to figure out and game out where the Supreme Court is going to be on this.
Yes, I mean, if you're trying to
have the guts
do that,
and backbone to do the right thing, so
that's an excellent
maybe this is a way out for them.
I think everybody can understand that. That way, no one will think it's your reasoning or preferred outcome. You say, oh, I'm not saying this is a good idea. I'm saying it's actually one of several bad ideas. Which, I mean, does anybody think the Supreme Court's going to land on a good idea? No, right? Everyone knows it's going to be a bad idea. This is one of several that they could land on. All right, fair enough. That's bad. I disagree with it.
Did you cover Neil Gorsuch's exact language?
Not in depth, but I did read a tweet from somebody who grabbed a screen grab somewhere of his language saying, and now I forget what it was.
It's on the Colorado Supreme Court opinion. I read a piece of it. But
yes, you did.
This is a real in-depth piece from Public Notice written by Lisa Needham, how Gorsuch made the case for banning Trump from the ballot.
Lisa Needham.
really quite interesting because what happened,
Lisa got him.
Trump tried to argue that he's not barred from running for office. He's only barred from holding office.
That's not bad.
Okay,
that is
so
not
he
bad,
runs, he
really.
wins. Then they say you can't hold office, and he says, "Well, I'm president. I'm, pardoning myself."
Yeah, but you can't because you don't hold that office. But
Now, this is
it's an
absurd on
interesting
its
thought.
face, and the Colorado Supreme
Oh,
Court
it's
was
great.
able to dispose of that argument
Oh, all right.
thanks to Neil Gorsuch.
Oh, yes. All right. Yeah. Okay. Now I see where you're going. Yes.
Right? Really? It says, back in 2012, Gorsuch was the judge in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, so he had Colorado.
Right.
In that capacity,
Isn't he
he
from
wrote
Colorado?
the panel opinion in Hassan v. Colorado. Hassan, naturalized citizen, sued Colorado, arguing it was required to put him on the presidential ballot even though he wasn't a natural-born citizen. Therefore, he was not constitutionally qualified to run for president, and the 10th Circuit ruled against him. Gorsuch wrote, the states have a legitimate interest in protecting the integrity and practical functioning of the political process, and that because of that, they can exclude from the ballot candidates who are constitutionally prohibited from assuming office.
Yes.
And there's only three things, according to Neil Katyal, that keeps you off the presidential office list.
All right.
You got to be over 35.
Okay. 1,
You got to be a natural-born citizen,
2.
and you can't be an insurrectionist.
3. Or 14 years a citizen of the United States. That's all right. We'll leave that one out because these days, if you're a natural-born citizen and over 35, you automatically qualify under that one.
Right.
Okay.
And then the third one was insurrectionist. So using Gorsuch's language, Colorado said, well, he can't serve.
Yes. Right. True.
So you want to be originalist and a textualist, they're giving Gorsuch an out here. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, but I see where Gorsuch wrote, and I quote, a legitimate interest in protecting the integrity and practical functioning of the political process, end quote, and think, well, that's his out for saying I'm going to ignore the rest of what I wrote.
Yeah.
Because taking him off the ballot
I don't have that interest.
would interfere with the integrity and practical functioning of the political process.
Yes. Yeah. He'll be able to reverse his logic there because I don't know. It is what you want to see in it, I suppose. All right.
Right.
That's a good way out.
Trump also
That's a good
complained
point,
that
too.
litigating his qualifications under Colorado's wrongful act election provision wasn't fair because it's an expedited process. Election challenges have to be heard quickly because there are elections coming up.
Yeah, right.
And Trump likes to delay things, so he was really mad. But the Colorado Supreme Court pointed out that Trump has never explained what precisely he needed in terms of additional discovery or other evidence he would have provided, undermining his claim that he needed more time.
Yes. I want more time.
Right?
That's
and then
different.
as this, I think I mentioned this on the show yesterday, other lawyers who have looked at this also said, we all read the dissents, and none of the dissents said or argued anything about Trump not being an insurrectionist. They were all little minor points that had to do with local conditions and local issues.
Right. They
In other words,
probably
what
were restricted
Vladeck
in
is
that.
arguing is that the Supreme Court should take the approach of the dissenters in the Colorado Supreme Court or the position of the Colorado lower court. Either way, you get to the same place. Everybody in the world agrees he's an insurrectionist. That's not the issue.
Everybody in Colorado, anyway. Yeah, right. That's true. Most of none of the 3 dissenting justices in the Colorado case said anything about his being an insurrectionist. They let that lie. Although really that was what they were supposed to do. They were handed factual finding from the trial court, and they're not supposed to review that unless there was an error of law in reaching that conclusion, and they didn't find any there, so they kind of had to let that stand, which is part of the brilliance of her decision. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have this decision that everybody's talking about, and they really are. Everybody's talking about this, various and sundry ways. I think it's terrible. I think it's good. I think it's logical. Here's how the Supreme Court could get out of it. But what they're talking about is the fact that Trump is an insurrectionist, and that all seeps in.
Yes.
And this is what you have to do to get out of the bubbles
Seeping
and get
down.
everything to seep into the body politic. Repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, everywhere, in every context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm happy to do my part
Sure.
in repeating that
Me
he's
too.
an insurrectionist. And
So now the reporters have to go ask people like Nikki Haley, well, what do you
Hey,
think of the
Nikki Haley.
Colorado opinion? And you can't say, well, I haven't read it. Well, I didn't read that.
Oh, it's very long.
Well, I haven't heard it.
I haven't read it, but I have read parts of it.
That won't work.
No,
It just won't
I
work.
guess not.
So Haley got really frustrated yesterday when this happened. And she said, look, I don't need the courts to beat Donald Trump.
Oh, really?
I'll beat him,
Sure.
like fair and square.
Yeah. No, you won't.
Words to the effect of, as Cassidy Hutchinson likes to say.
You know what she should have said is, I will refer all questions to Vivek Ramaswamy. Because
Right,
he's just
something
going to
like
answer
that.
them anyway. Look, I don't care, but he does, and he'll give you a quote.
But the point I'm trying to make is that this stirs everything up and you wind up talking about it, and talking about it.
Yeah.
So
2 days
if
already.
this
2 whole days.
Colorado opinion is a BFD and it might not even stick, sparking all sorts of opinion from across the political spectrum, from the board to my head is
That's
exploding.
good. Yeah.
Now imagine a Jack Smith conviction and tell me what the reaction would be and explain why the polls now in any way, shape, or
forget
form
that.
predict what's happening in 2024. Mm-hmm. That's my point before the break.
Okay. Well, that's a good point to make just whenever, even if you wanted to make it during the break. But for everyone else's benefit, it's good that it was made before the break. It will be a big deal. That will be exciting. Of course, this
And
also
people will talk
sparks,
about it.
Yeah.
And candidates will be asked to comment on it.
There are other courts, other states where similar actions are underway. We only got a day or two out of the previous state court decisions because in many cases they decided that they wouldn't keep him or others off the ballot. But you get a lot more attention by saying that you will. So if you're looking for that, if you're, say, State Court Justice Vivek Ramaswamy, that might be the answer. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Cough, cough. Oh boy. Well, it's winter. It's the winter solstice, as a matter of fact, and I guess it's hitting us both hard. So, yeah, lots of throat clearing going on today, but nothing. A little tea won't help.
Yeah,
not that I can go and get it yet, but okay. In the meantime, yes, where were we? We were going to do something special at this point. What was it? I don't know.
Well,
right.
Our friend Bosengood asked
That's
on Twitter,
Yes.
is it technical to find a president not an officer subject to Section 3 like the lower court did? Isn't that a form of immunity? Well, if you find that he's not an officer subject to Section 3, then basically you're saying presidents can insurrect if they want to. I don't think that's good.
Yeah, no, I don't think. Yeah, well, it's not. But yeah, so is he asking?
So is he immune to insurrection charges?
If that stands, yes, insofar as the penalty for insurrection is being barred from public office. There are other penalties for insurrection, of course.
Yeah, on the other hand, and let's talk a little bit more about how the Supremes are often political and not by the law alone.
And here comes Armando to say so. No, we'll just imagine that he's coming. He's rounding the corner, driving on his way here.
Yes, he has, actually.
Oh, that's all he says. I mean, but, we appreciate it.
Let's go back to Bush v. Gore.
All right.
Right? And decide something, and then say, but by the way, this doesn't establish a precedent for anything because we say so. Well,
yep, that was the line for which it's most famous.
Well, yes. So whatever the Supreme Court decides on this one, they can also add that and say, we're not establishing a precedent because there's a precedent for not establishing a precedent.
Yeah. They can say, that's the ultimate, say whatever you want. Yeah. Yes, they can say that. I think what Bosengood might have been asking here, I don't know, maybe was he disagreeing with the characterization of the state trial court's finding in Colorado that the president wasn't subject to Section 3 as a technicality?
Or the minority dissent, then is that what you're saying?
Okay. I mean, it is a technicality. It's not a good outcome, certainly, but I mean, it's a technicality in the sense that you really have to do some wild statutory construction, and this is it's constitutional, but you get the idea. But the way you read this thing is very convoluted in order to get to that decision. So, I mean, it's the most technical grounds. I mean, it's a big deal. It's substantively important that a president would be found not to be subject to Section 3. But the reason for not finding him subject to it is highly technical. Well, it wasn't listed among the several enumerated positions, and they appear to me to be listed in a certain descending order,
for lay
and
people,
so
this
therefore,
is getting off on a technicality.
Yeah,
but the overarching point is he's an insurrectionist, but we're going to have to come up with some sort of convoluted construction in order to keep him on the ballot. Because otherwise, if we did it straightforward according to the text, and we're originalists and textualists, he's off the ballot.
Yes. Is it too late to add charges to Jack Smith's case? I'm just curious.
No.
Let's do some of that. I mean, I don't know why this isn't a part of the charging document, but I will remind everybody that for all of the weird construction that this judge and others have given to Section 3, and there's a lot of commentary talking about, well, the president isn't listed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's unclear. Oath. Right, all of that stuff. There is a corresponding statute. It's not an exact match for it, but covers a lot of the same ground and uses a lot of the same terminology, which is what gives us the opportunity to compare the two. But 18 U.S. Code 23, Section 2383 with the Silk Row, 2383, covers rebellion or insurrection. It is a crime, and it was adopted as statute. It was codified. It's not exactly the same as Section 3, but it does also contain a disqualification clause and doesn't list any particular offices and doesn't put them in any, doesn't attempt to rank them ordinally in any sort of way. So it would be a lot harder to point to this statute and say it doesn't apply to the office of the presidency. All of the trial court judges' crutches in that one are gone and missing from this thing. And so are a lot of the crutches that others are leaning on, like, well, the 14th Amendment was really was meant to apply only to Civil War actors, and not reenactors, but actual actors, and Civil War era generation, and no one else, which is by itself, a little bit weird. Like, that seems like an awfully weird place to park a temporary sunsetting provision in an amendment to the Constitution. That's exactly where it doesn't belong. But there is no sunsetting here, and quite honestly, you'd have a hell of a time explaining why this statute was codified in 1909 at first, and further amended in 1948 and 1994, and they still didn't get rid of it or repeal it or remove discussion of the insurrection or anything. This modern Congress has touched this statute, and they never at any point said, well, to hell with it, we should get rid of it because it's only about the Civil War. It's not. That's why it's codified in law. That argument should be thrown out on its ear with respect to the 14th Amendment as well.
So since we're talking about the Supreme Court stepping back and taking a 50,000 foot view of all of this and playing politics, because they do, let's talk about a new poll that came out.
Oh, okay. Even though it's not valid.
America.
Yes. All right.
And it asks the question, do you approve or disapprove of the Colorado Supreme Court ruling?
Mm-hmm. But a year before the election, how can they ask that? Oh, it has nothing to do with it.
Well, it's not a year before the Supreme Court decides.
Yes, okay. That's right on time then.
It's right on time.
Yes.
So, U.S. adults, approve, 54. Disapprove, 35.
Hey, how many of them were Coloradans? We don't know. It doesn't matter.
We don't know because it's not about Lauren Boebert yet.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's a landslide in the presidential election.
Do the right thing. If you want to do the law, do the law. If you want to do the popular thing, do the popular thing. It's all the same, is my point.
It's all lining up. All signs point to yes for disqualifying him from the ballot.
We'll do no because there's the Supreme Court. But I'm just telling you.
We're
Democrats 84-8.
Contrarians.
Independents 48-35. And the interesting, Republicans 24-66. And what's interesting is the 24.
Yes, well, they're all the Colorado plaintiffs.
24% of Republicans approve of keeping Trump off the ballot.
That's a very popular motion. In fact, there's
a new
24%
of your party, you're toast.
Yeah. My new rule is it's the codicil to the Hastert rule, which is one, leave the kids alone is first. But second, I only bring measures to the floor if 20% of the opposition supports it.
There's a large number of people in the United States who are potential voters.
Right.
Who still haven't gotten their heads wrapped around the fact that Biden and Trump are going to be the nominees. There are still polling protests to Biden.
Right.
There are still polling non-acknowledgments about having to deal with Trump. I think there's still a big section. They didn't ask this question, but they should. A large section of people contacted who think to themselves, if they don't tell the pollsters, I don't want to be asked about this right now. I'm not ready.
Okay.
I haven't considered it. I'm just watching what's going on. If I'm watching at all, I hear about it on the news now and again, but I don't want to make a decision. I don't have to. It's not for another year. So that's one of the many reasons, in addition to what if he's convicted and so on and so forth. But if 24% of Republicans don't want him on the ballot and you lose them,
or
only 66% of Republicans think that he's the legitimate nominee of their party. That's amazing.
Yeah. And amazing that the next headline will be he leads by 2 percentage points.
Trump is front and center,
poll.
says the New York Times. No matter what happens and whatever Democrats hope, he's always front and center because you always center him.
Well, that's true.
Because Maggie Haberman's on your staff, because you always have like 5 Trump articles on the front page.
Well, he's amazing.
And then you ask the question, despite what Democrats think, Trump is always in the center, because we put him there.
Yes.
So some of the stuff has to be talked about.
Yes.
And no, it's not any publicity is good publicity. If you still keep talking about insurrection and January 6th all the time, that's why 24% of Republicans think it's a good idea. Maybe he's not there.
Yes.
Raise that to 28. Raise it to 30. Raise it higher.
Yeah. Well, that's a remarkable thing. It's interesting. There's always, no matter what direction you go, there's always a quarter. And 25% will answer to almost
23% or 24%.
They think he's great.
Remember the exact number. Were with Nixon when he resigned.
Right. Here, it's still 24%, but they're on the other side of things. That is interesting.
24% of Republicans. But that was 24% of the entire country.
Yeah.
So the fact that Trump isn't at zero, he's never going to be at zero. Look, 24% of the country is fascist.
Yes. He could be at zero in 100, 150 years from now. Well, he's good and dead and everyone knows it. And like hardly anybody says, well, I want to be contrarian. I want to screw with the pollsters. I'm for Rutherford B. Hayes. No one does it anymore.
Right.
So eventually. But he's going to have to die before he gets to zero. That's true. By all rights, it should be zero. How can you be an American and still support blah, blah, blah? Well, he's always voting for himself. There's no doubt about that. Ugh. Well, all right. That is very interesting. And there should be more polling about that. We should be encouraging more polling outfits to do more questions about that. Do you support this? And it will depend, I wonder, on how they ask the question. But do you support the decision? Do you support the idea of using this amendment to keep them off the ballot? I don't know whether anybody would differentiate at this point. Lawyers would say, well, yes, but I disagree with this Colorado Supreme Court's reasoning for it. Okay.
Well, most
That's
people,
not really
which
the
is to say
question.
about 50%, 54% of U.S. adults approve of the Colorado Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, that's
However,
great.
62% of adults think the Supreme Court will step in and do its thing.
And that's a good story to bring to John Roberts, right? 50, well over 50% think it was right, and well over 60% think you're going to screw it up.
Ian Millhiser was on Twitter and had a very funny comment. He said, "You know who should do an amicus brief on this? A friend of the court brief to the Supreme Court? Pollsters.
Huh.
They should give Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts an amicus brief that says, look, if Trump runs against Biden, he loses. But if Haley runs against Biden, she wins.
Oh.
You want to help the Republican Party?
Yeah. Or, just to make it more personal, you want to retire? This is how you do it.
Yeah. Well, if you get Trump off the ballot and you put Haley on the ballot, your party's going to win. So think about that.
Yeah. Then you can retire and be replaced by a Republican, which is
we're
your biggest concern.
Friends of the court.
Right. Also, if Trump wins, maybe there's no court. Although you could retire then, I guess. But you might also be under house arrest.
One other question on that YouGov poll. What do you think the Supreme Court will do? Not what you want them to do. What do you think the Supreme Court will do?
Right.
U.S.
Still
adults,
screw it up.
43% believe it'll be reversed and 23% believe it'll be upheld. And that's fair. That's probably right. That's probably the odds.
It's hard to guess. But, most people probably at this point, that's an important thing for them to see. I thought you were going to have an amicus brief that said something different. That's a very interesting twist that was Ian Millhiser gave it.
Yeah.
Another thing that they could present to them is just, I thought, the more straightforward and less wry of the options was to say, listen, the country is fairly solid. I mean, it's just 2 days, one day after the announcement of the decision. And I guess it's 2 days. And there's a fairly substantial majority for this, but it is important. You should know that 55% of the country approves of the decision. 65% of the country thinks you're just so committed to doing the wrong thing that you're going to screw this up. And to the extent you're worried about legacy and legitimacy, you need to keep that in mind. That would be the argument you actually make to them. In private, you would say. And P.S. if you're a Republican. Yeah. So
YouGov also had another interesting question here, which had nothing to do with that, but which just is fascinating here. And think about how the effects of, let's say, Israel-Hamas on Biden.
Yes,
right?
okay.
Americans who think of the following president, and they list a bunch of presidents, as more of a foreign policy hawk or a foreign policy dove.
Okay.
This is not one I had considered, but it's really interesting. Gerald Ford comes in at 17% think he's a hawk, and 27% think he was a dove. Carter is 1349. Okay. That sets the standard for doves.
I think so.
Okay. H.W. Bush was 4716, and W was 5116.
Yes. Okay.
Reagan was 5113. So people thought of those guys as hawks. Obama was 2243.
All right.
Okay. Biden's 1945.
So
if people think, well, he's a warmonger who's, public doesn't think that. Whereas Trump is 5513.
I mean, I assume it's mostly colored by the...
Trump eclipsed W as a hawk.
Interesting. And, of course, he ran as the Dove.
Right. So I just, what people's perception is just interesting. And, of course, all of that's going to flavor what happens afterwards.
Yeah, well, it has to do with rhetoric and the deployment of troops as well. And
vermin, and we're going to do something about it. All sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
to this. Yeah, but that's domestic, not foreign. Well, yeah, but,
Well, yeah, don't get too comfortable with it being
tough guy.
Domestic, and so therefore not deployment of troops.
Right, exactly.
That could be coming to an end as well.
John Della Volpe, pollster, who does the Harvard Institute of Politics Youth Poll, says, look, here are 4 recent high-quality polls. Overall, the race looks like a toss-up, something I've been saying. Polls using voter file, and that means there's no reason to get depressed about the polls. Polls using voter file with live interviews show Biden trailing youth and leading with seniors. Polls that use random digital dialing telephone and online panel show Biden leading with youth and trailing with seniors. Nobody can legitimately say what's right and what's wrong. This is kind of a big deal.
Okay.
Pay attention here. Methodology matters. And by the way, we don't know, is what he's really saying here.
That's not great.
I mean, Economist
YouGov
has 18 to 29-year-olds.
Working for them.
Biden's up 29 points. And Fox News has him down 7 points. Both of those can't be true at the same time.
Hello, fellow kids. Don't you oppose Biden like I do?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Right. And I guess it depends where you find them and if you're willing to lie.
And whether or not they're willing to answer the question. That's the differential non-response. You know, if you're depressed, you're not going to answer. If you want to make a lot of noise, you'll answer 7 times.
Yeah. Right, that's true. Or if you only interview people at campus protests, for instance, you'll get weird answers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, The Economist did an analysis a while ago.
It was economic
and finds that phones are more representative of voting behaviors for seniors. I'm a senior. I still have a landline.
Landlines, yes. Okay.
But online is more representative for the youth.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Okay, so Economist YouGov is online. And they got Biden up 29 points. All right. And I think I have to do, let's see here. What does Fox do? Oh, Quinnipiac is random digit dialing, landline, and cell. And they have Biden down 4 with seniors. And where's Fox News here? Fox News is landline and cell, and they have Biden up 10 with seniors.
Okay.
So, it's, subgroups are kind of tough to do because the smaller number gives you wider margin of error. So you can't say too much of it. But it's an interesting observation, and, just don't make too much of this. Don't make too much of the fact that, Biden's completely lost a generation. Well, that's not true.
Right.
A lot of these pollsters who claim that Biden's losing this subgroup by a huge amount, still has him up by 2 points.
How's Biden doing among people whose cell phones say every polling call is potential spam?
Exactly right.
I'm not answering that. I don't know what it is.
I get a lot of those calls.
Yeah,
like 8 a day.
Did you know they were all pollsters?
I assume that they're from something that I really don't feel like giving money to right now.
Yeah.
Maybe I already did. Maybe I just don't want to, and so I don't answer.
Okay. Well, that's probably how some of those polls happen.
Right.
Okay.
Now, this is another thing from the Fox poll, which is interesting. Let's see. In Iowa with Republicans, and this is specifically Iowa, Trump Nazi-echoing poison blood vermin speeches make Republicans more likely to vote for him.
Well, yeah.
Iowa Republicans are really interesting.
Yes. Although 24% of them want him off the ballot.
Who's the guy, Steve? What's his name with the calves the size of cantaloupes?
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Remember that guy?
Yeah. Shoot. Yes, I do. Why can't I bring his name to mind? Yeah, I
He's
probably could have if you hadn't said.
And I think that's what's being represented here with that. With that statistic. His constituency. Yeah.
Man, now I can't bring his name to mind. King. That's it.
Steve King.
Steve King. That's easy enough. But yeah, he's been out of the picture for a while, which is fantastic. I look for. Can you imagine when the day comes? What was that guy's name? The insurrectionist, Donald something.
Yeah, I wish that would happen. But more likely, Steve King was kicked out of the House Freedom Caucus for being not conservative enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. It's too liberal. You're out. Their
out.
calves are the size of watermelons. You idiot.
Okay, more opinions on this Colorado thing, which I think are worth mentioning. Again, everybody's talking about this. This is in the
Every
Nation,
day, all
Elie
day.
Mystal. The Colorado court's ruling banning Trump from the ballot is sharp as hell. While the ruling will be overturned by the Supreme Court, the conservative justices will have to tie themselves into a knot to do it. We just had a whole discussion about that. But that's exactly right. I mean, it's just so good. 220 pages with the dissent.
Hey,
let's read it. It's just really well documented, well reasoned. They took time. They dealt with the substance. They dealt with every possible objection. They didn't just dismiss it. Say, I don't have to talk about that. It's not germane. Let's handle it. You brought this up. It's stupid.
Yeah. Well, it's very nice. It's by all reports, it's well crafted so that it does mean that the Supreme Court will have to just wave its hands at something. Some portion of its decision is going to have to be. It's working this way because I said so, which is what Steve Vladeck is talking about. However they get around to it, that the 66% or 65% of the country think they're going to screw it up. How will it happen? Something like what Steve Vladeck says. Right. And there are a lot of key precedents that are very important and dearly beloved by lawyers and lay people alike, but that are based on some sort of reasoning that's a lot like that. I don't really know.
Like
we invented it.
Who knew?
Yeah, right. I kept blurting out, and this is because you're from Connecticut, Griswold. The Griswold v. Connecticut decision on
But this is a different
contraception.
Isn't this Colorado case, Griswold?
Oh, is it?
I think so.
I don't know. That's Clark Griswold. You're thinking of Vacation. But anyway, the Griswold decision, the establishment of finding a right to privacy for textualists, a real problem in the Constitution. Show me in the Constitution where it says any mention of privacy. You're right. It does. It sort of hints at it in things like personality and papers in the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure law. But that's where they invented well, it doesn't really say it, but there's these things called, this was a great vocabulary exercise for everybody, penumbra, the legal penumbra of privacy. They dance around it in the Constitution, and they don't say it. There's a reason. They knew the word.
Penumbra of privacy has to take a back seat to the scofflaws of democracy.
So, they come up with these things.
I think it should be worked into a decision.
I like penumbra myself. So it would be a great and powerful
the
combination.
Colorado Secretary of State is named Jenna Griswold.
Is that right?
And the person who was sued wasn't Trump. It was the Colorado Secretary of State to keep him off the ballot.
Well,
therefore, this was a something v. Griswold. Or Griswold v. something.
That's excellent. One of my favorite is similarly, I remind people that there is a big difference and different parties as between U.S. v. Nixon, that's the tapes, and Nixon v. U.S. That's Walter Nixon, federal judge, who was impeached and who complained that his impeachment was handled by a Senate committee rather than holding the trial on the floor, and said that was unconstitutional and was wrong. But a totally different Nixon, but not from a different era or anything. But yeah, that'll screw you up if you're not looking closely as a law student. Nixon v. U.S., cite Nixon v. U.S. and you're wrong on that one. If you meant about the tapes, you wouldn't have known it. But then, of course, the professors say, you didn't read, and now I know I can mark you down.
Yes, it's Anderson v. Griswold.
All right.
And I don't know who Anderson is. I guess they're one of the Republican plaintiffs who brought this.
Yeah, maybe.
And said that I got to sue the Secretary of State because I don't want this guy on the ballot.
Yeah. Right. Well, I thought it might be Harry Anderson from Night Court.
Right.
It's legal.
Now, we only have a few minutes left, so I have to get this item in from Blue, Virginia, because I just thought you would find it amusing.
Okay. They usually have short items.
short items here.
This will work. It's not a Marcy Wheeler.
Right. And it's you have to help me with the pronunciation.
Okay.
There is a Loudoun County.
There sure is.
Let's see, who is a General Assembly person.
Okay.
Whose name is Suhas Subramaniam.
Yes. I don't know if I can help you, but I know the guy.
Yeah.
But yeah. He's from my area. Well, Loudoun, you said.
Yeah, and he tweeted the other day, this week, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a case on access to mifepristone. The drug is safe, effective, and has been FDA approved for 20 years.
MIA.
Make no mistake, reproductive rights are under attack in Richmond and in Washington. I'll continue to do everything I can to protect them.
All right.
And the Loudoun County Republican Committee issued this statement.
Okay.
Suhas is openly trying to play God. By choosing who lives and who dies, he should be denied access to churches, mosques, and temples if he continues trying to play God. Only God should decide who lives or dies.
Why are Republicans trying to exclude God from our
listening public to understand how reactionary the Loudoun County Republican Committee is?
Yes. Well, they've been getting thrashed for 30 years. This used to be a red county, and they've been utterly destroyed, and this place is now overwhelmingly blue. They're going to be very frustrated people in the Loudoun County Republican Party. And isn't that interesting? He's trying to play God. Well, I would argue that everybody attending the churches that you want to ban him from are playing God. But, you would, of course, say I was wrong. And interestingly,
what about the people up at the front at the lecterns?
Yeah, right. They're definitely playing God, for sure. Or trying to channel God anyway. But that's an interesting move. I assume, by the way, that we're talking about somebody who is, I don't know whether he's a declared candidate or not, but Jennifer Wexton, the incumbent congresswoman for this district,
has to step down.
Yes, and so we now have like an 11 candidate slate, 11 candidate primary for the Democratic nomination there. So it's a busy time, and people are trying to get into papers, and the Republicans in Loudoun are doing their best to undercut anybody who might actually be a strong candidate.
Well,
and he might be.
I just wanted to point out that this, by the way, is a really offensive and obnoxious statement.
Gosh, yes. But yeah, there you have it. But
that's the Republican county committee.
Right. And those are the people who are driving the Moms for Liberty style stealth Youngkin campaign.
And last lightning item, just to get it in,
yes.
Representative Scott Perry has to turn over 1,600 messages to federal prosecutors. Good luck, Representative Perry of Pennsylvania.
Yes. All right. We'll see you next week. All right, I decided to wait till the music ended on that one, mostly because I drowned myself at the last second here. Pardon me. Little sip of water. One of the things about drinking water in the middle of the show, of course, is you're going to want to make sure it goes to the right place, like right into the lungs. Is perfect. Okay. Like just literally as I was supposed to be turning the microphone back on. I'm dying. And I didn't want you to hear it. Okay. But I'm okay now. And now you've heard me complain about it instead. All right. Where were we with all this? There's so many different directions we could go. Why not spend the rest of the show, a full hour, complaining about the presidents of various colleges that none of us are attending right now. That's what the rest of the news media is doing for some reason, and I just have no interest whatsoever. Let me double back, though, and there are a couple of things we left hanging, and none of them were Donald Trump, in the first hour. First of all, I can go back and tell you where that book grabbing was going on when I mentioned to you right at the beginning of the show when I was talking about what was on Justice's mind here about the police barging into a classroom or something like it, some sort of school setting, trying to search out some book that they were worried that some Moms for Liberty threesome loving person somewhere was going to get upset about because it was too damn sexy or something like that. I don't know. Let's see. Anyway, he provided me the article so that we could figure out what state it was happening. And all we knew for sure was that it wasn't Texas or Florida, and we were surprised about it. And it turns out to have been a New England state. But now we have to go figure out which one it is. We know it's a New England state because the story comes from to us from the Berkshire Eagle. And here we go. The police officer who searched for a book in a Great Barrington classroom. Great Barrington, making the news again. Also used a body camera. The ACLU has deep concerns. This from Heather Bellow at the Berkshire Eagle just yesterday. So let me go. I don't know. You want to sort this out, but doesn't that ring a bell? What is there's for Great Barrington. I just remember that they were in the news for something that has a negative connotation in my head because of I remember the Great Barrington Declaration. And I remember, wasn't that something stupid? And yeah, I think so. So can we straighten that out just quickly? The Great Barrington Declaration was an open letter published in October of 2020 in response to COVID pandemic lockdowns. It claimed that the lockdowns were harmful and could be avoided via the fringe notion of focused protection, whichever that might be. I don't remember exactly what they were trying to get at in that, but I recall it being the subject of some derision. What's the date on it? Can we tell? Because I just want to remind you that October 2020, and this might have had something to do, besides the stupidity of it, it might have had something to do with the fact that it didn't go anywhere. October 4th, 2020 is, I guess, the signature date. So I'm just reading the Wikipedia on it. I know this isn't where I meant to go, but Great Barrington demanded, reminding everybody, why do I know Great Barrington? All right, so it claimed that harmful COVID-19 lockdowns could be avoided via the fringe notion of focused protection, by which those most at risk could purportedly be kept safe while society otherwise took no steps to prevent infection. The envisaged result was herd immunity, remember that, within 3 months, and SARS-CoV-2 swept through the population as it swept through the population, and it did. And by the way, I guess we probably ought to be looking at these things and calling out the names of the idiots behind it, and not necessarily with the Great Barrington Declaration, because who the hell are they? But just thinking back to all the people who were like, yeah, we should be pushing for herd immunity, and now realizing, yeah, COVID is one of those things that people get multiple times. There's no such thing. It's not chicken pox. You can't have COVID parties, as people were saying that they ought to do, not just for their kids, but for themselves, because then you would have had it and then you'd be immune from it. And guess what? It was a novel virus. We don't know how it works. And now we know it does not work like that. That would have been super stupid. You would have had people exposing themselves to the virus, which at the time was not, when we had no vaccine ready for it. There were therapeutic treatments for it, and some of them worked. Some of them we wish didn't, but they did. Like, for instance, the one that they used to save the life of Donald Trump, which I bring this back to that. I know I harp on that a lot, but remember, this is October 4th, 2020, this thing is signed. And okay, they have no understanding. They couldn't predict the future, but that's why you shouldn't be saying, yeah, let's all just let it rip and we'll all have herd immunity. Well, that isn't how it works. But what was amazing about it, yeah, everybody, I don't know, some people now remember the Great Barrington Declaration, although I remember that it happened, just not what exactly it was. But maybe part of the reason for that is, as they were signing it, Donald Trump, denier-in-chief, was effing dying from this very disease that he denied basically the existence of. He was in Walter Reed Hospital dying before everybody's eyes. And I keep coming back to this point. I think, what was it that we were talking about the other day? I don't even remember. Oh, yeah, right. People were harping about, I guess there was some polling results, asking people, generally speaking, how they remembered the Trump administration, and that for some reason, all the horrific things that happened during it. I mean, that was the central focus of the Trump administration, was the daily horrors in every newspaper. Everybody was fretting and stressing and turning gray every minute of every day of every year of the Trump administration. But somehow it is now remembered as like we have this mass trauma and we're all erasing it. Oh yeah, generally speaking, things were pretty good. Pretty good at that time. And we remember it fondly, and maybe we should get it back. And everybody was just astonished at this. And I was thinking, yeah, I need to write a book on this myself, not because I have that much to say, but because I want people to, just give me a lot of money and recognize me as being a super smart person. And I guess books are the way that's done. Well, actual authors are now laughing their asses off. Lots of money. Yeah, well, try podcasting. Anyway, the point is that I wanted to call my book The Remdesivir Effect. How avoiding the death of COVID denier-in-chief Donald Trump changed history, or the trolley problem failure that changed history. If Donald Trump had been killed by COVID in October of 2020, what difference might it have made? What would life be like? I mean, would that just have been the end of COVID denialism? No, probably not. There were plenty of people who were angry about COVID measures and would just carry that torch. But I have a feeling that there would be a real damper on the fringe idiocy if the guy who gave everybody permission to be fringe idiots was just killed in front of all of us by the very disease that he was battling reality over. And I wonder whether the Great Barrington decision, having been signed and promulgated in the middle of Donald Trump's imminent death from COVID, didn't work out that way, but I wonder if that had something to do with it. Well, we've been working on this thing for a month, and it seemed like a really good idea at the time. And it's just, I don't know, bad timing. At the moment that we were about to make our proudest declaration, our biggest supporter and our biggest, rallying point was struck down by the disease and nearly killed in front of everybody. Oh, well, it didn't happen. And they were completely wrong about that. I mean, I'm thinking now about the people who have had COVID 3 and 4 times, and we should poll them. Hey, what do you think about the herd immunity theory now? Well, I'd like to go back to that one, but we haven't got time for that. As a matter of fact, we don't even have any more time for discussing the Great Barrington Resolution. We were supposed to be talking about the new dumb thing happening in Great Barrington. And if you were like, I don't understand, they came in to seize a LGBTQ book in New England. I thought that stuff was happening in Texas and Florida and not in New England. And maybe that explains it too. I don't know. I don't know anything about the demographics of the place. I don't know anything about the weird, there's weird microclimates in New England, and I guess we have this too. But it happened in Great Barrington. And if you associate Great Barrington with reactionary stupidity, then you say, oh, yeah, okay, Great Barrington. So, okay, what's the actual story? A plainclothes police officer who entered an 8th grade classroom to search not for a date like that judge down in Alabama, Roy Moore, but for a book, wore a body camera and recorded the incident, which is amazing because cops are constantly forgetting to wear or turn on their body cameras. But this one he got because he was prowling around in an 8th grade classroom. I want to make sure I have good video of this. This, of course, leading to more legal questions and concerns. What are they? For that, we turn to the ACLU, which is joining with other free speech advocates in saying that they are alarmed by the recording as well as the entire December 8th incident that took place after classes let out at W.E.B. Du Bois Regional Middle School. Maybe I should be reading the December 8th article, or the article about the December 8th incident, just for that background, except, let me just stick to this story. I'm sure they'll describe the background. Anyway, they also say they cannot recall any instances of police going into a school to search for a book. Yeah, that's troublesome, to say the least. schools and libraries have internal procedures for book challenges. The cops don't go and seize them normally. This sounds like a cop who, I don't know, he'd read in the paper that this was controversial and something, and so he was going to step in and do something, even if there was no law that he could be citing. But cops, they don't care about citing the law. Someone else will take care of that stuff. So that's partly what's so concerning, said Ruth Dworkin, I suppose is the pronunciation of this name, senior and managing attorney for the ACLU of Massachusetts. And that's the answer as to where is Great Barrington after all. Police going into schools and searching for books is the sort of thing you hear about in communist China. Ooh, right. And for Russia, what are we doing? Well, she's right about that. Berkshire Hills Regional School Committee and Superintendent Peter Dillon, Peter Dillon, have in a statement sent to the school community Tuesday apologized for how it handled the situation, stating clearly and unequivocally that it does not support book banning and committed to making all its students feel safe. The recent incident in a middle school has challenged and impacted our community, according to the statement, faced with an unprecedented police investigation of what should be a purely educational issue. We tried our best to serve the interests of students, families, teachers, and staff. In hindsight, we would have approached the moment differently. We are sorry. We can do better to refine and support our existing policies. We're committed to supporting all our students, particularly vulnerable populations. I guess, there's a link here to one of the other stories about it. But yeah, basically it comes down to this, the headline of the other story that's linked in here. Someone complained about a book in a Great Barrington classroom. Then the police showed up. And they're really not supposed to do that. And I guess the school here is saying, yeah, where were our brains? Why didn't we just say a cop has showed up? What are you doing here, cop? What's up? Can we help you? Yeah, I got a complaint about a book and I have to go see whether there is such a book in your classroom. They should have said, what? No, that's not a thing cops do. Go away. Come back tomorrow. Or don't come back at all. There's just, we didn't call you and you don't have any right to do that. But I guess they were just mesmerized by the fact that a cop showed up. Or maybe the cop told them something else was going on and they had to look for that. Who knows? Anyway, police then notify, we skipped a part here. The ACLU has requested that body camera footage and other records related to the complaint and investigation, I guess, be turned over to them. It was an anonymous complaint that led Great Barrington Police to open a probe about whether parts of the book Gender Queer, that's the name of it, by Maya Kobabe, do I have that pronunciation correct, could be considered obscene material or pornographic. And that's what you do. Everyone can do that, right? Everyone knows that that's a legitimate use. Call 911. What's the nature of your emergency? I need the cops to determine whether a certain thing is porn or not. Goodbye, click. But no, not in Great Barrington. Porn will be right there. Turn on your camera. There's teenagers involved. Oh my God. Yeah. Get over there, boys. Check it out. Oh boy, I can't wait to respond for the call. I think there's porn in an 8th grade classroom. Turn on the camera for this one. Wait, I'm going to shoot somebody. Turn the camera back off. Well, anyway, police then notified the Berkshire District Attorney's Office, as per the department's policy. And I guess at that point, the Berkshire District Attorney's Office should have said, stop, don't go, you're wrong, this is not your jurisdiction, go away. But instead they didn't, I guess. They also notified the school and district administrators that were coming to the classroom, and the officer was escorted there by the school principal. No. The teacher, who kept the book in her resource library, was surprised to see the officer. Yeah. The officer announced he was turning on his body camera and then looked for the book and did not find it. There's the Keystone Cops for you. I don't know where this book is. Maybe it wasn't even there, but wow. Okay, never mind. The DA ordered the investigation closed. He should be investigating himself. I don't know who it is. But anyway, the matter of whether the book is appropriate now rests with the schools, as it was supposed to in the first place. In his letter, the BHRSD, the BHRSD School Committee said the incident has challenged and impacted our community. Yeah, I know. We already said that. All right. We'll skip all this down here. I don't know. It's just amazing. The questions remain, or many other questions remain. The ACLU, parents, students, and others remain shocked by the police involvement. Governor Maura Healey also expressed disapproval of the incident and of book banning in general. Kobabe's award-winning illustrated novel is frequently the target of bans. It was the number one most banned book last year, according to the American Library Association data. Congratulations there. Genderqueer is a coming-of-age memoir about reckoning with confusion about gender and contains sexually explicit illustrations and language. It is this that many in LGBTQIA+ community say they believe is the reason for the censorship, not so-called obscenity concerns. But of course, these weirdos think anything that makes them uncomfortable is obscene. In Massachusetts, by the way, the test for obscenity is if the material is of interest sexually, depicts or describes sexual conduct in a way that is patently offensive to an average citizen of this country, and has no serious value of a literary, artistic, political, or scientific kind, according to the state. That doesn't sound like a test that's going to fail, but maybe in Texas or Florida. It was a complaint about so-called obscene materials in the classroom that police said led them there, something they say they had a duty to investigate, but the ACLU's Dworkin disagrees. We're very troubled by this notion, she said. They say anytime someone could call, they have an obligation to go marching into places wearing a body cam and, interrogating people, Dworkin said. State laws, she said, are pretty clear about police not having roles in this situation. Both the state and federal constitutions also protect the rights of students to receive information, she added, noting the ACLU and GLAD, G-L-A-D, legal advocates and defenders for the LGBTQ community, sent an open letter in January to school superintendents statewide, given the rise in attempts to ban school library books. All right, I'm going to jump back out of this story at this point. It's a long one. There's many more interesting details to it, but we get the general idea of it. And that is a big story under discussion today, and it's a fairly serious issue, just, in terms of it happening anywhere. And the fact that it happened in New England is kind of troubling all by itself. Now, back to the other big legal news, the continued discussion of the Colorado Supreme Court decision. And there were a couple of things, let's see, Greg sent at the end of today's discussion that warrant some more reading. Let's see. What was it from The Nation that he had just sent? Something from The Nation, Colorado court's ruling banning Trump from the ballot. Okay, got it. I mean, we know that it happened. A couple of things in the Atlantic as well, and I saw that Adam Serwer was also writing on it. We'll see what he sent me here. What's the last couple things that he sent? Oh, all the way down to the end. Oh, yes, right. There was Scott Perry was the story that he was mentioning on his way out, both in Politico and Law and Crime, that Scott Perry, we should catch up on this, ordered by a judge to turn over 1,600 messages to federal prosecutors. Has nothing to do with the address of the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it's ironic in some fashion. What's going on? The records could help fill crucial gaps in Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation of Trump's election interference. Do you know he's on trial for that, by the way? Yes. Is it too late to add a charge for insurrection? Not really sure. But we should get back to that one of these days, too. I think I explained it pretty well. Kyle Cheney, writing in Politico, following all these stories closely, has done a fairly good job with it all the way around. A federal judge ruled Tuesday, 2 days ago, that Scott Perry must disclose to federal prosecutors more than 1,600 emails, text messages, and other communications related to the investigation into Trump and his allies' bid to subvert the 2020 election. And, of course, he was one of those allies. Chief U.S. District Judge James Boasberg. We're used to seeing Beryl Howell in that role, but that's come to an end. And James Boasberg is now Chief U.S. District Judge there, concluded that the vast majority of the messages Perry exchanged, some with other members of Congress, some with members of the Trump administration, and some with allies outside of government, could not be shielded from prosecutors by Perry's constitutional protections as a member of Congress. Rather, Boasberg concluded in the that the 1,659, to be exact, exchanges had little to do with Perry's job as a legislator and therefore were not subject to the Constitution's speech or debate clause. I mean, just as Bob Menendez's gold bars are not protected by the speech and debate clause, which would otherwise ordinarily prohibit prosecutors and courts from prying into the official business of Congress. The records in question could help fill crucial gaps in Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation. What are those gaps? An inadvertently disclosed court document obtained last month by Politico revealed key aspects of the messages Perry had sought to shield from Smith's team, including exchanges with Trump's alleged co-conspirators in the effort to disrupt the transfer of power. The messages showed Perry as a crucial go-between for Trump and his allies on key aspects of their effort in the final frantic weeks of Trump's presidency. An attorney for Perry said he had not yet determined whether he will appeal Boasberg's ruling. I think we can determine that for you. Yes, he will. The FBI seized Perry's phone in August of 2022 in connection with its investigation into former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, who, by the way, is out and opining on the Colorado decision as well. He, though a key Trump ally in his bid to prevent the transfer of power, Perry introduced Trump to Clark in the final weeks of his presidency and pressed Trump to elevate Clark to the top of the Justice Department. Trump came close to appointing Clark acting Attorney General, part of a last-ditch plan to use the Justice Department to raise doubts about the outcome of the election before a mass resignation threat by DOJ and White House officials led Trump to back down. Still don't understand why he backed down to that. Boasberg's order largely addresses a ruling made nearly a year ago by his predecessor, U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell, who found that Perry was required to disclose 2,055 communications that he had attempted to shield, with only about 200 others protected from prosecutors. Howell ruled that Perry's informal efforts to probe election fraud were not covered by the speech or debate clause because he was not authorized by any House committee to conduct the investigation. Howell also ruled that many of Perry's contacts with members of the Trump administration could not be shielded because he was seeking to influence the executive branch and pursuing political ends rather than legislative ones. In other communications, he was seeking to influence the Pennsylvania state legislature. Perry appealed Howell's ruling in January, and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals quickly halted her decision, considering the matter for another 8 months before finally ruling that Howell had gone too far. Instead, the circuit ordered Boasberg, who by then had succeeded Howell as chief of the Washington, D.C. District Court, to review all 2,055 emails that Perry was attempting to shield and decide individually whether they could be disclosed. And guess what? 1,600 of them can. Boasberg ultimately agreed that nearly all of Howell's initial determinations were correct. Wowee. While some of Perry's contacts with executive branch officials or outside allies related to his legitimate work as a legislator, the vast majority, he determined, were non-legislative communications, like about polenta maybe, that could not be shielded from investigators. Boasberg also said messages Perry exchanged about efforts to urge Vice President Mike Pence to resolve disputes about electoral votes were too tangential to Perry's own legislative duties to qualify for protection. Pence ultimately concluded he did not have the power to determine whether particular slates of electoral votes were valid. Okay, now Greg sent on a second article about Perry, and let's go take a look at that one. This one from Law and Crime. We'll see whether it's any more analytical in nature. And it's Brandy Buckman who has written it here. Trump ally and lawmaker who allegedly asked for a pardon on January 6th. Good point. Thank you, Brandy. Ordered to turn over 1,600 plus texts and emails. So, I mean, the heart of the story is the same, but a good point about the fact that he, for some reason, unknown to the rest of us, thought he needed a pardon from Trump. And by the way, didn't get it. Okay. A Republican congressman who once allegedly sought a pardon from former President Donald Trump in the wake of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, has been ordered by a federal judge to hand over, 1,600 plus text and email records sought by investigators. Let's see, anything else we need to know about this one? This paragraph we can skip. Seizure was part of a larger probe into efforts to interfere in the 2020 election. It occurred long before Trump was indicted, and special counsel Jack Smith was tasked to prosecute him in Washington. Interest in Perry first arose as the Justice Department began investigating Jeffrey Clark. That was noted in the previous piece, for allegedly trying to pull off a fake elector scheme in Georgia. Perry introduced Clark to Trump. We know that. And let's see. What else can we fit in here before it's time to skip out for the next break? The January 6th committee obtained messages from Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, showing Perry using the encrypted app Signal to speak with him. Okay, that's of some interest as well. In the messages, oh, wait a second. I've got the wrong music going. I need the longer music, so that's going to screw things up a little bit. Anyway, in those messages, Perry would share conspiracy theories with Meadows about election fraud, including accusations that Italy, the United Kingdom, and China all hacked U.S. voting machines, and that former CIA Director Gina Haspel was part of the cover-up to get Joe Biden elected. Oh, okay. Sure. Of course she was. Well, pretty wacky at that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. All right, what else have we got here that we can add from Brandy's article that, it's fairly, it tracks. It's just straight reporting of the fact that he's lost this case, at least, or this ruling for the moment. But, a few more interesting details that she throws in that we should share with everybody, including, there's not enough detail here to unravel exactly what the judge decided this time that was different from what Beryl Howell had done. But I was kind of fascinated by the fact that Beryl Howell reviews these things and says, reviews the facts in general that were being alleged and says, there's no reason why any of these things should be protected by the speech and debate clause. Release them. And then they appealed and said, no, there really needs to be, they argued to this D.C. Circuit Court, individualized scrutiny of each of these messages to see whether any of them can be exempted. And the D.C. Court, the Circuit Court of Appeals said, yeah, sure, you're right. Okay, go ahead. Do an individualized review. And then they handed it to Howell's successor, Bozeman. Do I have that right? And then Boasberg, sorry. And then Boasberg said, all right, I'll review each one individually. Hey, guess what? I did, and Judge Howell was pretty much right. They should pretty much all be released. And not 2,000 of them, but 1,600 of them. I think in the first go-around, Howell said some 200 or so would be protected by speech and debate. And in a particularized review, I guess this judge said, well, we could throw in another couple hundred. And I don't know whether they were necessarily protected by speech and debate clause, but were otherwise not covered by the requests, the demands and subpoenas, etc., and otherwise not relevant to the various cases against Trump and Perry, if that's what this is all about in the end. So it's interesting that they probably thought they had won a great victory in the appeal to the D.C. Circuit, and they kicked it back down to the district court, and the district court said, yeah, you know what? It really substantially the same outcome under the new standard as defined by the circuit court, of course, but the outcome is pretty much the same. So where were we? Let me read you that that section and then finish up here. The Select January 6th committee obtained messages from Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, showing Perry using Signal to speak with him, right? And I guess now we find out that, yeah, this was him texting Mark Meadows. Italy, the United Kingdom, and China all hacked the U.S. voting machines, and the CIA director is in on it. Okay, that's probably not really related to your official duties. Now, of course, his argument is, look, I have a duty to my constituents to investigate these things. I mean, this is a very serious accusation. Well, the issues involved are very serious, but it's not a very serious accusation, actually. That China, Italy, and the UK were all hacking American voting systems in order to do something, and the CIA was letting them do it. I mean, again, they involve serious issues and serious players. It's just not very serious to believe that any of those things were happening. And, yeah, I guess if it's a matter of I'm going to investigate the CIA, you really kind of have to probably eventually get some authorization to do that. Anyway, when Meadows' aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, testified under oath to the Select Committee, she said Perry had attended meetings where Trump and his lawyers and allies would discuss the fake elector scheme. Once things went haywire on January 6th, she testified, Perry sought a pardon preemptively. Uh-oh, I'm on the wrong side of this. Now, at the time of her testimony, Perry called that a soulless lie. Interesting. He has adamantly opposed review of his communications, of course, and has asserted that as a congressman, his speech and debate clause afforded to lawmakers to keep their official work-related correspondence private protected his documents from scrutiny, namely just over 2,200 texts and emails sought by investigators. But Boasberg's ruling this week found that many of those messages in the bunch, 1,659 to be exact, were not protected by the speech and debate clause because they weren't communications actually related to his legislative duties. This, Boasberg noted Tuesday, was in line with a ruling from the judge who first considered the matter, Beryl Howell. Howell had found that most of the communications Perry said were covered by speech and debate did not meet the clause's criteria because they appeared to be attempts to influence politics, not legislative duties. These messages should be released because they were in the public interest, the judge found, though she acknowledged there were 161 records that Perry could appropriately hold back. Some of Perry's communications were unsealed this November. According to Politico, probably the article that we just read, it appears to have been inadvertent, this disclosure, on the court docket, since as soon as the messages showed up in a filing, the document went back under seal, but it was too late. The communications were with Perry's messages with numerous Trump allies and officials, including former Justice Department colleagues, plus Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Perry spoke about a push to challenge Biden's victory in 2020 and also appeared to embrace a plan to have Mike Pence admit testimony about so-called fraud before certifying the vote on January 6th. Politico reported Perry offered this idea to DOJ official Robert Gassaway, I don't think we've heard his name, in the week before the Capitol assault. Perry purportedly agreed to sell the idea with a call to Trump, but found himself rebuffed by Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short. A stupid guy is calling with a conspiracy theory. Should we let him through? No. When Howell first ordered the texts released, Perry appealed the ruling and temporarily won a stay on the decision, though it wasn't much of a victory. The ruling directed Perry's emails, texts, and other correspondence to Boasberg for his personal assessment of them under the speech and debate clause. Boasberg ruled Tuesday that after analyzing 2,055 documents, only 396 were protected. The judge gave Perry until December 27th to comply, 2 days after the big holiday, whatever that might be. An attorney for Perry, John Rowley, provided a comment by email to Law and Crime on Wednesday. So they got comment where Politico didn't. Politico went to press first, I guess. Here's the excuse. Congressman Perry has an obligation to his constituents. There it is. And the nation more generally, to investigate the seemingly credible information he received about discrepancies in the 2020 election. Although it was actually the fact that they were not credible. They did not seem credible. 15 nations are hacking our vote system, and Hugo Chavez is yada, yada. Yeah, sure. And the CIA is in on it. Very credible. The DOJ responded by seizing his phone and attempting to intrude upon his private communications with members of Congress and other people who, like him, were concerned about the integrity of the election. By the way, I mean, just to pause and offer something here. Because he's now in trouble, and he understands that, which is why he was seeking a pardon for his January 6th activities, but didn't get it because Donald Trump is, selfish idiot and doesn't care about anybody but himself. But now that he's in trouble, he thinks these should be private communications. But of course, if he had been right, or even approaching right, or just wasn't in trouble over this for whatever reason, remember, he's getting communications that he claims were related to his official duties, yes, and he wants to use the speech and debate clause to shield himself because now he's in trouble for them. But the content of these communications was, in his mind at the time, were credible allegations of something affecting the validity of our democratic system, the election of a president, and maybe everybody else, we don't really know. But if he thought that there was real credible evidence of a conspiracy to manipulate the outcome of the election, had Trump prevailed on January 6th and stayed in office, all of this information would have been brought to light. I mean, it was all still fake, but it would have been brought to light. Scott Perry couldn't wait to make this information public because he thought it proved his crazy ass conspiracy case. So the idea that, well, I have an obligation to keep this stuff confidential because and I have a duty to my constituents to investigate this stuff. His duty was never, I'm sure his constituents who were concerned with this stuff, if there were any, never meant for him to keep his findings private. They meant for him to publicize his findings, or whether they were really findings or not. It's just whatever I picked up in email or from crazy people on the radio or what have you, right? But the idea was never to keep it private. He's only fighting to keep it private under the speech and debate clause now because it's being used as evidence against him. When he thought it was evidence against Joe Biden, he couldn't wait to make it public. But but on the other hand, to some extent he did. I mean, they went around claiming all of this stuff and then said, well, I have the evidence, but I can't show it to you because I don't have it. All right, well, fine. Show us the evidence then. Now, because we want to see your evidence because it's actually evidence against you. Then I don't want to show the evidence. That is a little suspicious. I don't know if that's discussed in any of the rulings, but it really ought to be. Keep that in mind. I think that might make a difference in how we analyze these things in the future. Anyway, where were we? In the middle of concluding from Brandy's article here. Yes, the DOJ this is Perry's lawyer saying, well, he had an obligation to his constituents to investigate this stuff, seemingly credible stuff. But then the DOJ responded, to these allegations by seizing his phone and attempting to intrude upon his private communications with members of Congress and other people who he previously wanted to publicize. But other people who, like him, were concerned about the integrity of the election, applying the standard imposed by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. The district court has once again validated the protection of legislative records under the speech and debate clause, but only part of them. The intervention of the courts has been necessary to prevent overly aggressive prosecutors from interfering with the legislative deliberations and fact-finding. We're reviewing how the district court applied the standards required by the D.C. Circuit and will decide whether to seek further judicial review, Rowley said. And the answer, of course, is it buys us more time, so yes, we will appeal. They will appeal that Howell's standard was too lax, and the D.C. Circuit Court said, sure, we'll use different standards. Boasberg, you do the review. Fine, I will. All right, instead of 200, 300 are protected. Well, we appeal again. Maybe 400 will be protected next time. Yeah, maybe. I guess, by the way, to offer a counter to my own proposal about the fact that, maybe that's not such a strong argument after all, as I'm thinking it through here. But I don't know. It's an interesting one, and we should certainly weigh it. But I guess you could also argue, for instance, that, well, if the DOJ were gathering evidence against somebody in an investigation, they would have a strong interest in protecting it and keeping it confidential until the case reached a certain point. at which time all of the evidence would be disclosed. A trial, perhaps. But pre-trial and in the investigative phase, they would say, well, we don't want to comment on an investigation. We're holding our evidence closely right now because we're not prepared to charge this person, or if they have charged this person, we're not prepared to go ahead with a presentation of the evidence. We want to do some further investigation. But in the end, at trial, everything will be disclosed. You could say the same thing about that. Well, at a different point in time, you were going to be very interested in presenting this publicly. So what's the problem with it having been, let's say, hacked, leaked, or stolen ahead of your charging documents and published in the paper? Why are you investigating that? What's the crime if you were going to publicize it eventually? Well, it makes a difference at what point this stuff is disclosed, right? Yes, and we would recognize that. And so it's possible that you might be able to make that argument about the Perry messages as well. And he's no doubt is making that argument. It's just that they found that essentially there was never really going to be any protection for it at all for most of these things under the speech and debate clause because they just fell outside of your official duties. And while you can quibble about some of this stuff at the margins, it's, I guess, the finding of the court here that timing didn't matter because this stuff was never official business and never could be Scott Perry's official business. Okay. I don't know. I think that makes a certain amount of sense. And we'll take a look at a couple of other items now for our further edification. So I mentioned to you that there was some work in the Atlantic. I have something from Adam Serwer, and then there was something that Greg sent on, which looks to be a different piece from the Atlantic, but on the same topic. Once again, bouncing back to Colorado. What's this one? Oh, that's the one that he had, that Greg had for us was from David Frum. But we heard, well, did we? No, we heard from David French yesterday. David Frum, the other David F.R., conservative guy, is in the Atlantic with the piece, "The Colorado Supreme Court just gave Republicans a chance to save themselves, and they should take it." But by the way, if you want a similar conclusion, you can get it from Amanda Marcotte if you're more comfortable getting it from her. She wrote pretty much the same thing just yesterday. And Greg actually covered the point from the polling angle when he was saying that the pollsters ought to offer an amicus brief, right? And just to tell people that this is actually for the good of the Republican Party, and you should bounce Trump from the ballot just so that a Republican who you might allege has a better chance of winning election in 24 is put on the ballot, and then I guess you could all retire. But you will all be happy about that because you're all Republicans. Let's just admit it. So anyway, I don't think that's the point that Adam is making, although let's go and visit that one because this one, the others we've seen at least in slightly different form already. This one, under the headline of "The Colorado Ruling Calls the Originalists Bluff," which is another topic that we've actually already addressed here as well. But we've given it somewhat less time, and why not check in with what Adam Serwer is thinking here? It always pays. The Colorado Supreme Court has left the justices of the United States Supreme Court in the very uncomfortable position of having to prove that they have the courage of their stated convictions. Yesterday, Colorado's High Court ruled in a 4-3 decision that former President Donald Trump, because of his attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, is disqualified from appearing on the ballot in Colorado based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The language of that section, written in the aftermath of the Civil War to disqualify former Confederates who had taken up arms against the United States in defense of the institution of human bondage, reminder, is short and simple. We've read it before. He lists it here. We'll skip over it because we've read it in the past. There is no language limiting the power of the section to former Confederates, however, and I guess now it pays to read it again. Because, yeah, that's one of the big claims. And we addressed that a little early in the show, but you know the language. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president. Oh, pause for just a second. While there's the ruling from the Colorado District Court, dismissed in part, or, overruled in part by the Supreme Court, that the provision doesn't apply to the president because of the weird way in which these offices are enumerated here. At a minimum, though, wouldn't we now have to have an exhaustive investigation into the people nominated by Trump to be electors in 2024 and make sure that none of them had any January 6th connections? I mean, if it doesn't apply to the president, I think that argument was specious, and there might be a strategic reason for having done it, but even the district court judge would have to agree that, well, it specifically says elector for president or vice president. So if there are any January 6thers who are electors, and remember, several of them were put forward as fake electors in 2020, so it's very likely that they may show up as nominees for the Electoral College this time too, because, Trump might want to reward them for their loyalty. They should absolutely be disqualified. Now, it won't create a huge problem because there are always alternates, and they can substitute them even at the last minute, they can substitute them. But the fact that it doesn't have a great deal of direct impact doesn't mean it should be ignored. We should absolutely demand that those people be dismissed as electors and make a big deal of it. If we're going to have, to go back under a Trump administration and suffer the damage to our democracy, we should at least go down kicking and screaming at the end, if not doing some other things as well. But anyway, that's sort of beside the point. But no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector for president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state. That's different too. Who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. And we talked about what possibilities that might create too. Having read it, I'll remind you that there is a statute on rebellion or insurrection that doesn't exactly mirror the same. It's not the same kind of provision in the sense. Well, I'll read it to you. It's very short. It's shorter than the Section 3. Whoever incites, this is my favorite part, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion. Not because they took an oath or as this kind of officer or that kind of officer. Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort to, right? That mirrors the treason language, that mirrors the 14th Amendment Section 3 language. That's the term of art. Gives aid or comfort thereto. Shall be fined under this title. How much? That's an issue. But shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both. And shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. So, there you go. So there's that, which is nice. And let's see, what language do they use in the Constitution here? No person shall hold any office. But this one, so the word incapable is slightly different. But what's of interest here is that there's no enumeration of offices here. So there's no place to hide in 18 U.S. Code 2383 behind the idea that, well, it doesn't apply to the president because of the way that the offices were listed. There's no list of offices here, and it makes it plain. Whoever does it, it doesn't matter what office, you're incapable of holding any office under the United States. Now, you could say, well, what's an office? And given our 14th Amendment jurisprudence, we decided that the presidency isn't one. Well, no, it's not that we decided it wasn't an office under the United States per se. It's just that there were reasons to believe it was different from the other offices. Now, the more extreme view of it is, no, it's something else. It's something other than an office, even though we reached that conclusion by looking at the wording of the oath for some reason, and the oath says it's an office. So I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be able to reconcile those two things, but the statute doesn't help us at the moment. We would have to prosecute him under that statute because with the constitutional provision, you can say, well, that's self-executing. And it doesn't say anywhere in there that it requires a conviction. It just requires engagement in insurrection. But on the other hand, so does Section 2383 say that engagement in inciting, setting in foot, assisting, engaging in rebellion or insurrection is the problem. But because it's a statute, it's generally understood to mean that it would require a conviction to impose any of these penalties. And these penalties, outside of the incapability of holding office, are in fact ones that would impinge on life, liberty, or property. And we would understand that to require court action and a court finding, a judgment of guilt. So it doesn't kick in automatically, but it does for the purposes of legal analysis of are we parsing the 14th Amendment correctly. It pays to point out that there is a statutory method of prosecuting rebellion or insurrection, and it doesn't seem to care what kind of office you occupy or whether you occupy an office at all. It's just that you shouldn't in the future. So that's of some interest. So back to Adam Serwer with our remaining few minutes here. There is no language limiting the power of the section to former Confederates, right? And that too is that's a new argument. Well, they really meant for it to be only about Confederates because then there was the Amnesty Act later on, for instance, and we haven't had rebellion or insurrection since then. And that's the big argument. And it's a maybe. It's an interesting point, but again, I'd just say that that's not the nature of the Constitution. We don't store short-term issues like that in the Constitution. But then maybe we did so, and then the circumstances were changed by the Amnesty Act. We can anticipate the general amnesty a few years later. It's possible. But again, there's no mention in the text for textualists about it being limited to the Civil War. And then there's the argument that the corresponding statute also makes no mention about it and has stayed on the books despite the fact that they have amended it of late. I mentioned to you that there's a fine that's possible. It used to be that the fine was capped at $10,000. In the 1994 amendment to that statute, to 2383, what they did was, all they did was get rid of the cap. So you can be fined more than $10,000. They just eliminated it. They didn't say what the cap would be. There's no cap to it. So great. It could be $1 billion, whatever. The point is they dipped back into that well. They looked at that insurrection statute and they didn't say, oh, we should just repeal this whole thing. Because remember, this was only about the Civil War anyway. They said, no, it would be useful to have an insurrection statute stay here. And decided not to erase it, which I think could certainly argue that no, it was never all meant to apply to the Civil War and nothing else. Now, back to Adam. Indeed, given the number of people who served in the Confederate Army and government, such a requirement would have been impractical had, I guess, so we skipped a little bit here. No language limits it to the Confederates, however, and its scope is sweeping with no requirement that those engaged in the specified conduct must be convicted. That too is not there. Indeed, as they say, the number of people who served in the Confederate Army would have made that an impractical consideration. The Colorado court weighed all of this in arriving at its decision. We do not reach these conclusions lightly. We are mindful of the magnitude and weight of the questions now before us. We are likewise mindful of our solemn duty to apply the law without fear or favor and without being swayed by public reaction to the decisions that the law mandates we reach. In framing the stakes this way, The Colorado court is calling the bluff of the U.S. Supreme Court's originalists, forcing its conservative justices to choose between their purported legal philosophy, and there's some question about whether it really is their legal philosophy or not, and the partisan interests of the party with which they identify. The ruling itself seems written with a consciously originalist interpretation, with an eye toward legitimizing its conclusions to the justices who will ultimately be compelled to deal with the case. The possibility that Trump's actions disqualified him from holding office again was explored in careful detail in August by the conservative legal scholars William Baude and Michael Stokes-Paulson. They wrote, "It would not be going too far to say that Trump, having previously sworn a constitutionally required oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, knowingly attempted to execute what, had it succeeded, would have amounted to a political coup d'etat," don't argue with that, "against the Constitution and its system of elections and overturn the results of the constitutional process in order to maintain himself in office as president contrary to law." There are a lot of practical reasons for opposing Trump's disqualification. One is that it removes the choice of rejecting Trump from the electorate, which might seem undemocratic, even if it's done with constitutional provisions adopted by the people's chosen representatives. Another is that it could damage the legitimacy of democracy itself by appearing to confirm Trump's allegations that the political system is rigged against him. Still another, it could lead to unrest or political violence. It's not hard to imagine Republicans embracing the provision and using flimsy pretexts to disqualify opponents who did nothing reasonably defined as insurrection or rebellion, as they now threaten to do, of course, with Joe Biden. All of these things, he argues nonetheless, need to be disregarded for equally practical reasons. What are they? Well, you'll either have to wait for tomorrow or read it for yourself.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I know, that was a bit of a tease, but the reason is, it's a good reason. We're turning things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, next right here on Netroots Radio, and of course he'll be discussing this from any number of angles, and he'll give you an even wider variety of news from around the country and around the world, because that's the kind of guy he really is. We'll see you tomorrow.